The quiet on the bridge of the Resolute was different now. The focused tension of the operation was gone, replaced by a hollow, echoing stillness. The main viewer no longer showed a terrifying swarm, but a vast, empty scar in the starfield. It was a clean circle of nothing, a perfect hole punched in the Krillix fleet. At its edges, the few dozen surviving ships drifted, lifeless, like leaves after a fire has passed. Sensor Officer Park Hana, a young woman with sharp eyes that now seemed very wide, stared at her screen. The data was clear, but her mind rebelled against it. 10,000 enemy contacts. Then, in the span of a breath, 0. The readouts showed a residual, harmless dust of base elements: carbon, iron, silicon spreading thinly where the Armada had been. No energy signatures. No life signs. Nothing. She had watched the lights on her screen vanish, not one by one, but all at once, in a single sweeping wave of erasure. "My God," she whispered into the quiet. The words were automatic, a relic of an old Earth religion dot at the tactical station. Li Tay heard her. He finished his post-protocol checks, his movements precise. He looked up, his face calm, but his eyes holding a deep understanding of what his console had just unleashed. "No," he said softly, his voice carrying in the silence. He corrected her not with criticism, but with a simple, terrible fact. "Human." Hana looked at him, then at the viewer, then at the back of Captain Jiho's head. She understood. This was not an act of divinity. It was an act of engineering. It was something her species had willed into existence. The weight of that knowledge settled on her. Heavier than gravity dot at his command station, Captain Park Jiho finally moved. He let out a long, slow breath, his shoulders relaxing a fraction. He had not realized how tightly he had been holding himself. He opened a channel to engineering. "Chief Day, full systems diagnostic. Report on core stability." Kang Day's voice came back, gruff as ever, but with a note of reverence. "Singularity contained and stable. Power levels at 87% and climbing. No stress fractures on the projector emitters. She performed exactly to spec, Captain. A clean execution." "Good," Jiho said. The word was small. He turned to Kim Mina. "Comes. Receive and catalog all incoming traffic from the Concorde. No active responses unless critical." Mina nodded, her hands already moving. Her screens were a cascade of light thousands of signals flooding in from the Citadel of Unified, Will and every remaining Concorde ship in the system. They were not tactical reports. They were bursts of raw emotion, disbelief, terror, awe, gratification so profound it bordered on hysteria. Prayers of thanks to gods the humans didn't worship. They were the screams into the void after the sudden silencing of a noise that had lasted for generations. Jiho did not need to hear them. He could guess. He had seen the look in Archon Valerius' eyes. "Captain," Mina said after a moment, her voice subdued. "Priority channel from the Concorde Supreme Archon. She is requesting an audience." "Audio only," Jiho said. He had no stomach for seeing their faces right now. The voice of Archon Valerius filled the bridge. The melody was gone, replaced by a shaken, brittle tone. "Captain Park, the Krillix force is gone." "Confirmed," Jiho replied. "We are detecting no residual threat in this system, or in the adjacent 3. Their hive links appear to have been severed across the sector. They are leaderless, broken." She paused, and the silence on her end was filled with the unsaid. "You have done what we could not do in a century of war. You have ended it." "We enforced the terms of peace," Jiho corrected gently. "The Krillix were given a choice. They made theirs." Another long pause. What do you require? What does Earth require in return? Resources? Territory? A seat on the High Council?" The questions were desperate, an attempt to fit this into an old, familiar framework, the politics of debt and payment. Ji-ho almost smiled, a sad, thin thing that no one saw. We require nothing, Supreme Archon. The Resolute was dispatched as a response to a distress call. The distress has been resolved. Our mission is complete. The confusion on the other end was palpable. But you cannot just leave. There is rebuilding. There is. We need to understand. We need to learn from you. You have learned all you need to today, Ji-ho said, his voice firm but not unkind. You have learned that there is a line past which conflict becomes impossible. That is the lesson of Pax Catastrophica. How you rebuild, how you govern yourselves, that is your concern. Humanity will not interfere. We never wanted to be your rulers. We only wanted you to stop killing each other. He nodded to Mina, who understood. The channel was gently closed. Lieutenant Tay, Ji-ho said, standing up from his chair. The crew felt the movement, a shift in the center of gravity. Plot a course for the Sol system. Standard cruise speed. No hurry. Aye, Captain. Course for home plotted and laid in. Chief Day, secure from all tactical readiness. Condition 5, cruising mode. Aye, securing now. Reactor to cruise output. The deep thrum of the ship softened, becoming a nearly silent background vibration. The lights on the bridge brightened just a little. It felt like a normal watch after a long and difficult day. Ji-ho walked to the viewport, looking not at the empty battle zone, but at the stars beyond. The untouched stars. He felt the eyes of his crew on his back. He spoke without turning. It is a heavy thing, he said, his voice low, to hold this kind of peace. It is not a victory to celebrate. It is a responsibility to carry. Remember what you saw today. Remember the cost of the alternative. We carry this so that others, and our own children, never have to see it again. He turned to face them. They looked young to him in that moment. Even Tay. They had just become veterans of the quietest, most total battle in history. You performed your duty with excellence. I am proud of this crew. Now, let's go home. The orders were given. The UEDS Resolute turned, a slow, graceful movement in the void. Its nose pointed away from the Lysandra system, away from the stunned and watching Concord, away from the ghostly dust that was all that remained of a galactic threat dot. It moved toward the jump point, its engines flaring with a soft, blue light. There was no fanfare from the Concord, no final messages. They were too busy trying to comprehend the new shape of their universe. A universe where peace was not a treaty, but a fact imposed by a single, dark ship from a world they had once pitied dot as the Resolute made the jump, translating into the seamless gray of faster-than-light travel. The last sight of the Lysandra system was the citadel of unified will, its spires gleaming. Around it, the Concord ships hung in space, not moving. They looked like toys abandoned by a child. On the bridge, Hannah watched the starfield dissolve. She thought of the word Tay had used, human. She had joined the service to see the wonders of the galaxy. She had seen the greatest wonder and the greatest terror humanity had ever made, and they were the same thing. She felt a chill, but also, for the first time since the protocol had fired, a fragile sense of peace. The ship sailed on, a solitary island of calm in the silent sea of space. Behind it, it left a galaxy that was still forever changed, not by the thunder of war, but by the sheer, unbearable weight of the silence that followed the last shot that would ever need to be fired. The peace of total ruin had been spoken, and the universe, for now, had nothing to say back. The meeting on the Citadel of Unified Will ended not with agreement, but with a heavy, stunned silence. The human captain and his engineer were escorted back to their shuttle, their plain clothes a stark contrast to the glittering halls. No one tried to stop them. No one knew what to say. The data from the meeting, the explanations, the terrifyingly simple schematics, spread through the Concord High Command like a virus. Arguments erupted. Some leaders, like Gorlick, called it a bluff, a psychological play. No species could wield such power so calmly. Others, like Archon Valeris, felt the cold truth in their bones. The humans had not come to negotiate. They had come to announce a new reality. On the bridge of the Resolute, life continued as normal. Kim Mina monitored the flood of confused and fearful Concord communications. Li Tae ran constant diagnostics on the weapon systems. Kang Dae was back in his engine room, humming to himself. Captain Park Ji-ho sat in his chair, watching the starfield. He was waiting. He did not wait long. Deep within the hive mind of the Krillix, the encounter at the convoy was not a defeat. It was an anomaly. A painful, puzzling anomaly. The hive had never encountered a non-biological intelligence that could so efficiently destroy its forms. It analyzed the data, the kinetic impacts, the perfect point defense. It concluded the new enemy was a high-value, dangerous prototype, a priority target. To eliminate the anomaly, the hive would apply its oldest, simplest solution: overwhelming mass. Across 3 star systems, Krillix swarms disengaged from their attacks on Concord outposts. Harvesters, carriers, stingers, and the massive, slow planet breakers all turned. They began to move, not with the mindless hunger of before, but with a single, coordinated purpose. They flowed through jump points, converging into a single nightmarish armada. Their destination, the Lysandra system. Their target, the anomalous blocky ship. Concord sensors picked up the movement first. Panicked, fresh and sharp, replaced the earlier confusion. General, the Krillix. They are abandoning all other fronts. Thousands of signatures. They are all coming here. Kaver watched the tactical map. 1,000 red dots became 10,000, all streaming toward their position. It was the full, terrifying might of the Krillix in this sector. They were not hiding their intention. It was a declaration. They would drown the human ship in bodies if they had to. He opened a channel to the Resolute. Captain Ji-ho's face appeared, calm as ever. "Captain, you must see this," Kaver said, his voice tight. He sent the tactical data. Ji-ho glanced at a secondary screen where Tae displayed the same information. The swarm was a solid wave of red, blotting out the stars. It was the largest military force the Concord had ever witnessed in one place. "We see it, General. You must withdraw. Now, take your ship and go. You have given us time, more than we hoped for. But this is what we warned you about. You cannot stop this. No one can." Ji-ho was quiet for a moment, studying the screen. "Are the civilian convoys clear of the projected engagement zone?" Kaver was baffled. "What?" "Yes, the last ships jumped to safety 20 minutes ago." "That is not the point." "Captain, they are coming for you." "Good," Ji-ho said. "That simplifies things." He turned his head slightly. "Lieutenant Tae, prepare protocol Getchard mirroring. Set the engagement boundary at the limit of their long-range bioplasma weapons. We will not let them fire on the station or any remaining Concord assets. Protocol Getchard mirroring. Acknowledged. Setting boundary now. Powering primary systems." Tae's hands moved over his console. Across the bridge, other officers followed silent, pre-programmed routines. "Captain Park," Kaver shouted. "What are you doing? What is that protocol?" "It is the final warning, General," Ji-ho said. His eyes were hard now. The patience was gone, replaced by a flat, operational finality. "Please secure your station. There will be a localized space-time event." The channel closed. On the Resolute, a deep, resonant hum began. It was not loud, but it was felt in the bones of everyone on board. The lights on the bridge dimmed slightly, then stabilized. On the ship's hull, the usual cool blue running lights flickered and went out. For a moment, the ship was a completely dark, silent silhouette. Then, along its spine, a single line of intense white light glowed to life. It was painfully bright, like a crack in reality. Mina, at her con station, took a deep breath. At Chiho's nod, she sent the signal. It was not a complex message. It was not a visual broadcast. It was an audio-only transmission, sent on every frequency, from the tight-beam military bands to the public entertainment channels. It was translated into every known Concord language and pulsed in the raw command code of the Krillix hive. The voice was Captain Park Chiho's. Calm and clear. This is Captain Park Chiho of Earth. You are encroaching on a protected zone. Withdraw immediately. The message repeated, once, twice, on the citadel of unified will. Every screen, every speaker, every comms unit played it. The entire station heard the plain, unemotional words. Withdraw immediately. The Concord leaders stared at each other. That was it? No threats? No listing of weapons? Just a traffic warning? The Krillix swarm received the pulsed version. The hive mind processed the command. It recognized the source. The anomaly was speaking. The hive mind's response was not anger or fear. It was a collective biological refusal. The concept of withdrawing from prey was illogical. The command was ignored. The swarm pressed forward, crossing the invisible boundary Tay had set. On the Resolute bridge, a final chime sounded. Warning period expired, Tay said, his voice barely above a whisper. Hostile forces within the engagement boundary and accelerating. Protocol is live. Execute, said G.O. There was no grand command. No dramatic button press. Tay simply tapped one final key. The white line along the Resolute's spine flared. For a brief, terrifying second, it looked like the ship would crack open. Then, the light did not shoot out. It pulsed. A sphere of distorted darkness, ringed with that blinding white light, expanded from the ship. It moved faster than light. A bubble of altered physics. It washed over the leading edge of the Krillix swarm. What happened next was not an explosion. There was no sound in the vacuum. Of course. But every sensor, every mind watching, expected one. They expected fire, debris, shockwaves. They saw none of that. The Krillix ships at the front of the swarm did not blow apart. They came undone. It was as if they were paintings made of sand, and the wind blew. Their structures, their organic curves, their pulsing membranes, simply dissolved into a fine gray mist. One moment they were formidable warships. The next, they were an expanding cloud of inert, atomic dust. The effect did not stop. The bubble of unraveling space continued to expand, swallowing the swarm. Ship after ship, from the tiny stingers to the colossal planet breakers, simply ceased to be. They offered no resistance. Their adaptive biology, their powerful weapons, meant nothing. The law that was being applied to them was not one they could adapt to. It was the law of non-existence. It was over in less than 10 seconds. The bubble reached its preset limit and vanished. The white line on the Resolute's spine dimmed and went out. The ship's normal blue running lights flickered back on. Where there had been an armada of 10,000 vessels, there was now empty space. A perfect spherical volume of clean vacuum. At its very edge, a few dozen Krillix ships, those that had been trailing, hung frozen. The hive mind connection for those ships had been severed instantly. They were brainless, drifting husks. The silence across the Lysandra system was deeper than space itself. It was a silence of the mind, of the soul. On the Concord station, Archon Valiris was on her knees, not in prayer, but in sheer physical shock. General Caver gripped his command console, his knuckles white. He had seen the translation of the protocol's name. Gotthard Niring. Twilight of the Gods. He finally understood. The humans had not named their weapons after gods. They had built weapons that made them obsolete. On the bridge of the Resolute, the crew was quiet. The hum had faded. The systems were returning to standby. Laite finally broke the silence, his screen showing nothing but clear space. Protocol complete. All designated hostile forces within the boundary have been neutralized. No secondary threats detected. Kim Mina let out a slow, shaky breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Captain Park Jiho unclenched his jaw. He looked at the main viewer, at the vast, empty spot where the enemy had been. There was no triumph on his face, only a profound, weary solemnity. He had not wanted to use it, but the warning had been given. The choice had been made for him. The galaxy had stilled. Not in anticipation this time, but in the aftermath of a soundless, starless thunder. The war, for all intents and purposes, was over. The invitation was not a request. It was a priority command channel directive, though it was phrased with careful politeness. The Concord High Command required the presence of Captain Park Jiho and a senior technical advisor aboard the command station. The citadel of unified will. The station hung in high orbit over Lysandra, a beautiful spired construct of crystal and light. Now marred by battle scars, Jiho accepted without comment. He chose Chief Engineer Kang Ge to accompany him. Day was a man of few words, with grease often under his fingernails and a mind that understood the ship's heart better than anyone. The trip was made in a small, unarmed shuttle that emerged from the Resolute's belly. It was just as plain and functional as its mothership Dot as they docked in the Grand Bay. They were met not by an honor guard, but by a tense contingent of Concord soldiers in polished armor, and a flock of officials in flowing robes. The difference was stark. The humans wore simple, dark blue duty uniforms, devoid of decoration. The air in the station was scented and warm. The humans felt out of place, like stones on a silk sheet. They were led through shimmering corridors to a vast chamber. A semicircle of raised desks looked down upon a central floor. Seated at the desks were the surviving admirals and political leaders of the Concord. General Cavour was there, looking older. At the center sat the Supreme Archon, an elegant being with large, luminous eyes. Her name was Valiris. Captain Park Jiho, Valiris said, her voice melodic but strained. You have our profound gratitude. The lives of the Lysandra convoy are a light preserved in our darkest hour. She paused, her eyes searching his face. We require understanding. Your vessel performed actions we believed impossible. We must know what manner of aid now flows to us from Earth. When will your main fleet arrive? Jiho stood straight, his hands clasped behind his back. Day stood beside him, his expression one of mild curiosity as he examined the chamber's energy conduits in the ceiling. There is no fleet. Supreme Archon, Jiho said. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Valerius leaned forward slightly. A scout force, then? The Vanguard? No, ma'am. The UEDS Resolute is the sole Earth vessel in this region. It was dispatched in response to your distress call. The murmuring grew louder. An admiral with deep blue fur, named Gorlock, slammed a hand on his desk. Impossible. You expect us to believe your species, which our archives list as pre-contact and fractured, built a single ship that can do. That, he gestured to a viewport, where the distant speck of the Resolute hung. And then sent it alone? That is not aid. That is a gesture. A cruel one. Jiho remained unflinching. It is not a gesture. It is a solution. The Resolute is a peacekeeping vessel. Its mission is to end conflicts. Peacekeeping? Gorlick spat the word. What you did was an act of brutal war. No, Admiral, Geo said, his voice still calm. War is a contest. A struggle between relative equals. What you saw was a protective action. A definitive response to a threat. The goal is not to win a fight, but to remove the possibility of fighting altogether. A profound confusion settled over the chamber. The concept was alien to them. Their entire history was one of wars of attrition, of winning and losing battles over centuries. Valerius held up a slender hand for silence. You speak of removing possibility. With one ship, the Krillic swarm numbers in the tens of thousands across this sector. They will learn. They will adapt. They will return to greater numbers. Your single vessel, however powerful, will be overwhelmed. You must see the logic of this. For the first time, Jiho glanced at Kang Dae. The engineer gave a small, almost imperceptible shrug, as if to say, "Might as well explain." "With respect," Jiho began, "you are applying Concord logic to human engineering. You see a warship. It is not. It is a system. A system built around a principle we call Pax Catastrophica." He used the human term, and the translator struggled for a moment before settling on the piece of total ruin. The chamber went utterly silent. The name itself was a chilling paradox. Gorlick found his voice quieter now. Explain this principle. Explain your system. Kang Dae cleared his throat. Jiho nodded for him to proceed. Dae stepped forward. He spoke not like a diplomat, but like a teacher at a blackboard. You fight wars with increments, Dae said. Better shields, faster engines, bigger plasma bolts. It is a race. The Krillics are good at that race. They adapt biologically. You try to out-invent them. It is a close contest. He paused, pulling a small datapad from his pocket. He tapped it, and a simple schematic of the Resolute appeared in the air above him. It was brutally simple. Human peacekeeping is not about increments. It is about thresholds. The Resolute is not designed to fight the Krillics. It is designed to make any fight with the Krillics irrelevant. Let me give you the numbers so you understand the scale. He pointed to the hull. The armor is not simply thick. It is composed of interwoven molecular layers, self-repairing, energized by a fraction of the ship's output. Your strongest plasma cannon, Admiral, would need to fire at the same spot for approximately 45 minutes to achieve a meaningful penetration. The Krillics cannot do that. Gorlak's fur bristled, but he said nothing. Dae continued, pointing to the power core. You asked about energy. The Resolute is powered by a contained quantum singularity, a small, artificial black hole. Its energy output is, for practical purposes, infinite. The weapons you saw, the point defense, the mass drivers, they use less than 1% of available power. They are firecrackers. A nervous twitch went through the Archon Valerius. Firecrackers. Then, what is the primary weapon? Valerius asked, her melodic voice now thin. They zoomed the schematic in on the ship's spine. The main armament is a mass-driven singularity projector. It does not fire energy or matter. It creates a temporary, localized gravitational singularity at a target point in space. It is not a weapon that destroys ships. He looked around at the assembled leaders, his face earnest. It is a weapon that destroys the space the ships are occupying. Within a defined radius, the laws of physics, as they relate to gravity and quantum cohesion, simply stop. Matter unravels. Energy dissipates into the vacuum. There is no debris. There is no defense. There is only a brief area of nothing, and then normal space returns. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a vast, cold void opening up beneath their feet. They had feared the Krillix because they consumed worlds. This was different. This did not consume. This unmade? You have used this device? Gorlick whispered. No, Jiho answered, reclaiming the conversation. Its use is the final step of Pax Catastrophica. The principle requires a clear sequence: presence, demonstration, warning, then, if necessary, absolute erasure. We have completed the first 2 steps. The Krillix have seen our presence and felt our demonstration. They will receive a warning. If they ignore it, they will be removed. Not defeated, removed. Archon Valiris stared at him. The gratitude in her eyes had been replaced by a deep primordial dread. They had called for a savior, and a god of annihilation had answered. This was not an ally joining their war. This was a force announcing the war's end, on its own terms. And this, she struggled with the words, Pax Catastrophica. This is how humanity keeps peace. Among yourselves? Jiho's face softened for the first time, into something that was not quite a smile, but held a trace of ancient sadness. It is the reason we have peace among ourselves. We passed our threshold. We looked into the abyss of what we could build, and we made a choice. To build the ship that ends all ships. To speak so loudly that no one ever needs to shout again. We sent the Resolute not to fight your war, but to tell you, and the Krillix, that the war is over. He looked at each of them in turn. The question now is not whether we can defeat the Krillix. The question is whether you will stand aside while we enforce the peace. The silence on the Concord command ship did not last. It was broken by a surge of frantic new signals. Not from the Krillix, but from the Concord's own surviving captains. What was that? What kind of weapon did they use? General, do we have new allies? The voices overlapped, a mix of shock and of fragile, desperate hope. General Caver could not answer them. He was still staring at the tactical display. The sector around the human ship was a clear, clean circle. The tiny debris cloud from the Krillix drones was already dispersing. The blocky vessel had not moved. Its energy signature remained that same faint, almost sleepy hum. It was as if it had swatted a fly without waking from a nap. He cleared his throat, the sound harsh in the quiet bridge. Open a channel to the Resolute. Priority frequency. He needed to understand. Was it a trick? A new Krillix weapon designed to confuse them? On the screen, the image of the human captain appeared. Park Jiho. He looked calm. He looked like a man waiting for a train, not a commander in a galactic war zone. Behind him, the bridge was shadowed, lit by soft console glows. It looked orderly, quiet. General, Jiho said, his voice translated smoothly by the computer. There was no pride in it, no gloating. Just a simple acknowledgement. Captain Park, Kyver began, choosing his words with care. Your defensive action was noted. We thank you. However, the tactical situation is extreme. That was a scout probe. The main Krillix swarm is now converging on the Lysandra refugee convoy. They are fleeing the planet in barely functioning civilian haulers. We cannot protect them. He paused, expecting to see fear, or at least urgency, on the human's face. He saw none. Your vessel is powerful, but it is only one. We strongly advise you to withdraw with our remaining forces. You cannot stop a full swarm assault. Jiho listened. He glanced to his side, where his tactical officer, Li Tae, was studying a separate readout. Tae gave a small, almost invisible nod. General, Jiho said, his tone still flat, you stated the civilian convoy is the priority. Provide us the coordinates and their intended vector. We will assume a defensive position between the convoy and the swarm. Caver blinked. Was the human not listening? Captain, You do not understand. Hundreds of Krillix vessels are moving to intercept. Hundreds. Your point defense, while impressive, will be overwhelmed by sheer volume. This is not a skirmish. It is an extermination run. A new voice came from the human bridge. It was a younger man, with sharp eyes focused on his work. Li Te, we have the swarm on scope, Captain. Estimate 327 primary biovessels plus fighter screen. They will be in weapons range of the convoy in 17 minutes. Thank you, Lieutenant, Jiho said. He looked back at 4. The coordinates, General, please. Frustration boiled in Kaver's chest. This stubbornness would get them all killed. But if the human wanted a shield, let him. It might buy the convoy an extra minute. He gestured to his comms officer. The data packet was sent. Coordinates received, said Kim Mina from her station on the Resolute. Plotting intercept course. General, Gio said finally, you should direct your forces to assist the convoy from the flanks. We will handle the main body. The channel closed before Kaver could protest further. On the viewer, the dark human ship began to move. It did not accelerate with the graceful, glowing thrust of Concord drives. It simply went. One moment it was holding position. The next, it was cruising smoothly towards the projected path of the Krillix swarm, its speed alarming in its silence. Follow them, Kaver ordered, his voice weary. But at a distance, record everything. The Lysandra convoy was a sad procession. 23 large, slow civilian ships, their hulls scarred, their engines pushed beyond safety limits. They carried the last million souls of a planet. Behind them, the beautiful blue-green marble of Lysandra was marred by the ugly black lesions of Krillix Spore City's dot, and ahead of them, like a wall of living night, was the swarm, the lead civilian ship's captain. An old being named Alara felt despair closing in. She could see them on the long-range screen, a moving stain against the stars. Her comms were full of the prayers and whimpers of her passengers. Then a new signal cut in. It was from the Concord Command, but the voice was unfamiliar. Lysandra Convoy, this is Captain Park Geo of the UEDS Resolute. Alter your course by 2 degrees starboard. Maintain your current speed. Do not deviate. We will intercept the hostiles. Alara had no time to question. She adjusted the course, and then she saw it. A single blocky ship moving past them. It was heading straight for the wall of Krillix. It looked so small, a pebble against a tsunami. She closed her eyes, not wanting to see its destruction. On the Resolute Bridge, the atmosphere was focused, but not tense. Jiho watched the main viewer, which now showed the approaching swarm in all its horrifying detail. The Krillix bioships were organic shapes, all sharp edges and pulsating membranes. They filled the screen. Final weapons check, Jiho said. Primary mass drivers charged. Singularity projector at standby. Point defense arrays active and linked. All systems optimal. Tay's report was crisp. Swarm will enter maximum effective range of our area denial systems in 60 seconds. Standard doctrine for hostile swarm encroachment, Jiho stated. It was not a question. Standard doctrine confirmed, Tay replied. Broadcasting the warning. A signal on all frequencies in a simple, digitally constructed version of the Krillix's own command pulse went out from the Resolute. It contained one concept. Stop. The swarm did not stop. It accelerated. Warning expired, Tay said. Hostiles confirmed as actively hostile. Executing area denial protocol. On the hull of the Resolute, the same hexagonal panels opened. But this time, different systems activated. Along the ship's spine, larger panels slid apart. The Krillix swarm opened fire first. Bolts of corrosive bioplasma, capable of melting through Concord battleplate, streaked across the void. They never reached the human ship. A network of lasers, faster than thought, intercepted each bolt, detonating them at a safe distance in flashes of sickly green light. Then the Resolute replied, It was not a single weapon. It was a symphony of violence, perfectly orchestrated. From the smaller apertures came a storm of railgun fire, denser than before, creating a shifting, swirling kill zone around the ship. Any Krillix fighter that entered this zone simply ceased to exist. But the true horror was the ship's spine. The mass drivers fired. There was no bright beam. Instead, large, heavy projectiles, invisible to the naked eye, were hurled at a fraction of light speed. They did not aim for individual ships. They aimed for the center of the swarm's formation. The first projectile struck a mid-sized carrier. It did not punch a hole. The kinetic energy was so vast that the entire organic vessel shattered, exploding outward in a viscous cloud of frozen biomatter. The second and third did the same to others nearby. The carefully structured swarm formation suddenly had massive, violent holes torn in it. From the distance, General Caver and his crew watched, their sensors overwhelmed. They saw the flawless defensive screen, the impossible accuracy. They saw the Krillix ships simply disintegrate under the kinetic assault. The human ship was not dodging. It was not maneuvering. It held its position in front of the convoy, and it was dismantling the swarm piece by piece with a calm surgical precision. The Krillix, for the first time in Concord history, broke off an attack. The hive mind, facing total, inexplicable loss, issued a retreat signal. The remaining ships turned, scrambling back toward the edge of the system. The entire engagement had lasted 4 minutes. On the Resolute, Tay studied his readouts. Swarm is in full retreat. No pursuit vessels detected. Convoy is intact and proceeding on clear vector. Jiho nodded. Stand down to Condition 3. Monitor their withdrawal. On the civilian lead ship, Captain Alara opened her eyes. The wall of death was gone, replaced by a field of drifting, frozen debris. The blocky ship was still there, unharmed, its hull not even scored. A single, cool blue running light winked slowly. The channel from the human ship opened again. Lysandra Convoy, you are clear to proceed to the designated rally point. Safe travels. The voice held no warmth, but also no fatigue. It was the voice of a job completed. Back on the Grace of Tadar, the silence returned. It was deeper this time, heavy with a new and terrifying understanding. This was not luck. This was not a secret weapon. This was a level of technological warfare so far beyond them it seemed like magic. The humans had not just fought the swarm. They had dismissed it. They had, as Captain Park had said, handled it. General Caver looked at his own battered, beautiful ships, and then at the dark, simple shape of the Resolute. He had asked for a savior. He had not understood what he was asking for. A cold feeling settled in his gut. The Krillix were a nightmare. But this was something else. This was the stillness after a storm that had not yet even begun to truly rage. The long war had worn the galactic concord down to its bones. For 3 generations, the Krillix swarm had pushed forward, a silent, relentless tide of chitin and cold purpose. Their ships were not built. They were grown, ugly, and efficient. Worlds that once shone in the Concord network were now dark, their populations consumed, their resources digested to feed the hive's endless expansion. The command hub, orbiting the scarred planet Lysandra, was a place of shadows and quiet despair. General Caver, his fur matted and lacking its usual luster, stared at the strategic hologram. It was a map of slow, certain death. "We cannot hold the Lysandra line," a tactical officer stated, voice flat. It was not news. They all knew it. The reserves are gone. The Fifth Fleet is debris. Our weapons. They adapt to our weapons faster than we can invent new ones. The words hung in the recycled air. There was only one option left, a shameful, desperate option from a darker, more prideful time. Decades ago, during the first surveys of the Orion Arm, they had found a species on a small blue world. They were fractious, divided into hundreds of competing tribes, their technology primitive, their energy signatures a childish flicker. The Concord observers had filed a report. Species designate human. Threat assessment negligible. Potential minimal. Recommendation: quarantine for 500 standard cycles to observe natural development, likely self-termination. They had been forgotten, a footnote in a dusty database. Bring up the file on Sol 3. Humanity, Kyver ordered, his voice a gravelly whisper. The data streamed. Images of crude chemical rockets, primitive fission weapons, violent global conflicts over ideology and territory. The Concord counselors, those few who remained, looked on with a mixture of pity and disgust. They are animals, barely space-capable, one murmured. What choice do we have? Kyver snapped, a spark of his old fire returning. We broadcast the distress beacon on all old survey frequencies. We beg. If they come, they will be a distraction, a speed bump for the swarm. It might buy Lysandra's evacuation a few more hours. That is all we can hope for. The message was sent. A grim, formal play for aid against a galactic threat. No one expected a reply. On the bridge of the UED's Resolute, the message was anything but ancient history. It played on the main viewer, the translation crisp. Captain Park Geo sat in his command chair, his face a calm mask. He was not an old man, but his eyes held the weight of long patrols and difficult decisions. Beside him, Lieutenant Lee Tay monitored the tactical sphere, his fingers dancing over the holographic controls with a musician's grace. At the communications station, Specialist Kim Mina listened with a focused intensity. It's the same one they've been sending for the last 72 hours, Captain, Mina said. The signature matches the old first contact package we dug up from the Luna archives. Origin point, Concord Military Holding near Lysandra. The Krillix threat appears. Legitimate. Sensor ghosts from the edge of our network show massive energy discharges consistent with planetary bombardment. Jiho nodded slowly. And the Concord's own assessment of us from their files? Mina allowed a small, tight smile. Negligible, primitive, recommended for long-term quarantine. A soft chuckle came from the engineering station, where Chief Kang Dae was monitoring the Singularity Core. Primitive. I like that. It's quiet. Decision window closes in 10 minutes, Tay stated, his voice devoid of emotion. The navigation solution to the Lysandra rally point is plotted. The Council's authorization is pending. They waited. The Resolute was not a warship, not by the definitions of its crew. It was a peacekeeping vessel, the first and greatest of its kind. Every system, from its curved, charcoal-gray armor plating to the silent, monstrous power plant at its heart, was built around a single, terrible idea: to make war not just unwise, but unthinkable. It was a message written in physics and weaponized gravity. The authorization light flashed green on Jiho's console. A simple text scroll from Earth Unified Defense Command. Proceed. Demonstrate Pax Catastrophica. Jiho took a slow breath. Lieutenant Tay, initiate the translation jump. Maximum safe velocity. Let's answer the call. There was no dramatic lurch, no roar of engines. The Resolute's drive did not push it through space. It gently persuaded the universe to move aside. The stars on the viewer blurred, stretched, and snapped into a new, hostile configuration. The edge of the Lysandra Warzone was chaos. The brilliant energy trails of Concord fighters, sleek and elegant, weaved and died against the black, jagged forms of Krillix drones. A Concorde cruiser, its beautiful lines broken, vented atmosphere in a silent, glittering cloud. The swarm was a locust plague against the fading light of civilization. On the Concorde command ship, Grace of Tidar, alarms were a constant background shriek. General. Another translation signature. At the edge of the beacon's locus, a sensor officer cried out. Kaver leaned forward. Finally. The Boreth have reconsidered? How many vessels? One, General. A single vessel. Its configuration. It does not match any known Concorde or Krillix design. It is blocky, utilitarian. Energy profile is minimal, barely above background radiation. The hope that had flickered in Kaver's chest died. One ship, it was an insult. A pity gesture from some minor species who had heard the beacon. Put it on screen. The main viewer shifted. The UED's Resolute hung against the tapestry of battle. It was not beautiful. It had no graceful spires, no gleaming hull. It was a slab of angled armor, dark and imposing, like a cliff face that had wandered into space. Its running lights were a subdued, cool blue. Open a channel. Kyver sighed, the weight of the galaxy back on his shoulders. Unidentified vessel. This is General Kaver of the Galactic Concorde. Your aid is noted. You are instructed to hold position at the periphery and avoid engagement. Your safety cannot be guaranteed. The message was polite, but the dismissal in his tone was clear. Stay out of the way. On the Resolute, Mina received the message. Captain, or being told to stand aside, politely. Jiho looked at the viewer, at the dying Concorde ships, at the relentless swarm. Acknowledge receipt, and send our prepared response. Use the old Concorde first contact protocols. Mina nodded. Sending. UED's Resolute responding to galactic distress. Assuming position to defend civilian evacuation corridors. Standing by, the message appeared on Kaver's screen. He scoffed. To defend? With what? A single hull? Their arrogance is as primitive as their technology. Ignore them. Focus all power on the retreat of the third wing. The Krillix swarm, a mindless, hungry thing, also registered the new arrival. A single, small, cold object. It was not a threat. A handful of drone fighters, perhaps 24, broke from the main assault on a Concorde carrier and angled towards the Resolute. A cleaning action. A swatting of a gnat. On the Resolute bridge, a soft chime sounded. Tay's voice was calm. Captain, inbound hostiles. 24 Krillix biomechanical drones. Range closing. They are on an intercept course. Jiho didn't even shift in his chair. Standard defensive response. Point defense array. Saturation pattern. No primary weapons. Let's not be rude. Acknowledged. Saturation pattern. Activating now. Outside, along the dark hull of the human ship, 100 small panels slid open. No barrels emerged, only flat, hexagonal apertures. For a moment, nothing happened. Then space around the Resolute became a storm of light. Not the bold, colorful lances of Concorde plasma, but the stark, white-blue lines of hyper-accelerated metal slugs from railguns, interspersed with the pinpoint flicker of high-energy lasers. It was not a volley. It was a wall, a solid churning sphere of annihilation that expanded outwards. The Krillix drones, built to withstand energy weapons, flew straight into a blizzard of kinetic death. They did not explode. They were pulverized, shattered into billions of fragments that were then vaporized by the lasers. It was over in less than 3 seconds. The space where the drones had been was empty, save for a faint, expanding mist of atomic dust dot the silence on the Grace of Tadar was absolute. The alarm sirens seemed to fade away. Every officer on the bridge was frozen, staring at the tactical display that showed the 24 hostile signatures simply disappear. The sensor officer finally whispered, his voice cracking, "General, the unidentified vessel. It eliminated the Krillix detachment. Complete annihilation. No energy spike from primary weapons. That was point defense." Kaver could not speak. He looked from the clean, empty sector around the human ship back to the chaotic, losing battle surrounding his own fleet. The dismissal, the pity, the arrogance, it all curdled in his stomach. That single blocky, primitive ship had just performed an act of defensive warfare with an efficiency the Concorde had never dreamed possible. And it had done so without seeming to expend any effort at all. Across the battle zone, other captains noticed. The frantic chatter on the Concorde command channels stilled, replaced by a buzzing, disbelieving silence. Weapons officers paused, staring at their scopes. The Krillix swarm, for the first time, seemed to hesitate, its collective mind processing the sudden, clean void where its drone should have been. The galaxy, for a moment, stilled. The war did not stop. The dying continued. But every being on every ship felt a shift, a change in the gravity of the moment. Something new had entered the war zone. Something that did not fight like them. Something that, with a flick of its wrist, had erased the threat they would have struggled against. And it was just sitting there,